If you enjoyed today's story, please consider subscribing to the channel, where new stories are uploaded regularly on Thursday mornings. Thank you for listening. The Angel Gven by P.E. Rowe. Rena, Enolo. It takes an improbably odd set of circumstances to bring a person out to Beta Nissim. Everyone who ends up here for any reason has a story that begins with how they even came to hear of Nissim in the first place. Few have. A large part of the secrecy stems from the fact that the system wasn't even properly mapped before the war. There was water in the early colonial spectroscopy, sure, even biosignatures, but that's not entirely rare. And because of the cruder way they mapped in those centuries before the pre-war era, those biosignatures often got dismissed as faulty readings. You could see how Nissim could have been passed over by human and AI alike. For as rare as planets with breathable atmospheres are, their numbers add up in a swath of space as large as the letters. Water worlds, planets or moons, are perhaps tenfold more numerous over similar areas. Most water worlds, Beta Nissim included, get passed over. It takes a lot of effort and specialized equipment to fly into a gravity well and then explore the oceans beneath such a body's ever-shifting surface. The water worlds that do get explored usually have some area of dry land, or at least an outcropping or two where an expedition can gain a foothold. Not Nissim. The closest land is 1,000 meters below sea level. The only reason Nissim's mysteries were ever discovered was a chance encounter in the earliest days of the war. There was a ship, the Caspian, a commercial passenger transporter taking settlers from the Dreesen cylinders to nearby Beta Coronado. In those early years of the war, with the lines not clearly defined, it was practice to approach boundary systems like Coronado with caution. The Caspian somehow entered coordinates for the wrong proximate system on approach, and they ended up in Nissim, only to find themselves staring at an ocean planet so replete with biomarkers that the crew resolved to keep Nissim a secret, fearing that publicizing the discovery would provoke a Trasp incursion, as they were claiming every valuable Indie and even some lettered systems in those early years of the war. It was decades before the secret got out to the academic community, and still years more before corporate enterprises heard of her. My improbable journey here began regularly enough. I studied fluid mechanics in Catherineburg, thinking it would be a nice life to be one of the aquatic engineers managing the hydraulic systems that keep the waterlands flowing clean and bright. Surely it would have been a nice life, but there are a limited number of placements for such engineers, and far more people like me with dreams of rivers and lakes who end up with realities filled with pipes that are themselves filled with certain other fluids that aren't clean water. And as much as I am willing to swallow my pride, I was never gifted with a particularly strong stomach. So when I heard mysterious whispers of a project near Beta Coronado, I inquired myself. I took a test and did well. Then I found out it was, even superficially, very intriguing, at least for an expert in fluid mechanics. It was a government research project to map currents and tidal flow on a strange little world almost nobody had ever heard of. How could I say no to that? I didn't even imagine I'd ever see an ocean in my lifetime, much less get to map a new one. That was how I became one of the several thousand human beings of all the thousands of billions alive in the battery to ever visit Beta Nissim. Rare company. Nissim itself was a secret, but more. Secrets and whispers surrounded the planet from the moment I arrived in Coronado. The name Nissim itself, in the rare instances it was recognized among the locals in Coronado, instantly changed the tone of every conversation. The energy shifted. I could almost see people thinking, does he know? Should I tell him? What lies ahead for this young man out there? Rumors, myths, strange occurrences. I heard a few stories. I dismissed them. What did I know? How was a young man who'd never left Iophos supposed to process such things? I took it as nothing more than playful hazing. Watch out for whispering ghosts out on those lonely waters, son. On the day I began training on the hybrid submersible, I was told a tale of a predecessor who'd been beset by music in the depths. The story went that it haunted her so completely that she would deviate from her assignments to seek out the sounds she regarded as supernatural. She came to believe she was being summoned by a divine consciousness. I told my training officer that I wasn't so credulous as to think a scientist would suddenly lose all sense of reality.
Spend a week alone on a sub out here in Olo,
he told me, shaking his head.
Then let's talk about it again.
We spoke several months later on the base, after I'd had some time to settle in. I hadn't heard music, nor had I experienced any of the other many odd occurrences that got told and retold in hushed tones at the commissary or over drinks post-deployment. But I'd heard enough stories by then, told earnestly by trustworthy people, that I no longer dismissed the tales as hazing. I guess I just thought that perhaps there were phenomena on Nissim we'd yet to fully comprehend, not least of which were the native creatures of this vast maritime ecosystem. When I told my colleagues this, they often rolled their eyes, as though I hadn't quite gotten it yet, or I'd never get it, or that I didn't fully appreciate the depths Nissim possessed on multiple dimensions. Amongst my colleagues, though, I garnered a reputation for being steady. I suspect that even-headedness was what landed Rena Cattell with me, that and the fact I was always ahead of schedule. She looked like a trainee when the CR introduced her in the tower lounge. I was in the middle of a long lunch, taking in the welcome sight of sky and sun and sea before heading out again for a week-long deployment that evening. She was wearing a perfectly neat jumpsuit and shiny boots, and the equally bright smile of an eager new arrival. I had been selected, the CR told me. All of my other work could wait. I was to assist Dr. Cattell with her research. The CR left Dr. Cattell with me in the lounge, then and there, as she hadn't eaten yet, having just arrived. She was eager to get right to work, and I was going out that evening. That, and she was told by my superiors that I was steady. I've been called worse things, I joked with her as she sat across from me. She smiled at that, and it was a nice smile, genuine. I could tell right away she was a good person. Some rare people exude that energy through their very being. I gave her several recommendations on the menu before discussing her work. Once she made her decision on lunch, she looked up at me as though she was ready to talk. "Where is it you need to go?" I asked her.
"I need to find one of these,"
she said, flipping up a float screen from her wristband. On it was a Batara, a species in great abundance in the temperate waters of both the northern and southern hemispheres. "A Batara," I replied. "That won't be too hard. I look forward to hearing what you want with them along the way." Batara. The Batara abounded in the central seas of Nissim, and I began by explaining to Dr. Cattell that there were, in fact, seas, despite the fact that the planet's surface was one contiguous ocean. Much like stable storms in the atmospheres of gas giants, the currents in Nissim proved to be stable pockets of circulating waters that constituted largely closed aquatic systems. It was my task to map them, and I had been making good progress, which also helped the biologists to understand the distinct ecosystems of the planet better. Dr. Cattell seemed impressed by our progress, especially in light of the scant information she was given before her arrival. The flight out from base Kifar to the Greater Singing Sea was 5 hours, and I estimated another 12 or so before we got down to depth and encountered a school of the common Batara. "What do you want with the Batara?" I asked her after I got the autopilot on. Her eyes were eagerly scanning the ocean's surface beneath us, as well as the horizon, seemingly in wonder at the scope of the water world. The hybrid submersible was a slow but steady flyer, and a much more capable submarine vessel. She'd never been inside one before.
"The Batara,"
she replied, and the way she responded to the question indicated she wasn't quite sure where to begin.
"Do you like the short answer or the long answer?"
"How about we start with the short answer and go from there, Dr. Cattell?"
"The short and crude answer is that I got sent here to eat one,"
she replied, letting out a laugh that made me doubt whether her answer was sincere. "Eat one?" She nodded.
"Test stomach,"
she replied, smiling, her hands covering over her abdomen, which was a comical way to confirm that she was being sincere. "I see."
"They are edible. Have you ever had one?"
"Me?" I asked her. "No. I've heard rumors of the other pilots trying some of the marine life, but I'm not nearly that adventurous. I would worry about toxicity."
"You would be right to worry in many cases. That's one of the things ALM has been testing with the samples the biologists have been collecting down here.
Oh, you're corporate. She nodded. I just assumed you were academic, Dr. Cattell.
I guess the title does give that impression. But corporations need highly trained scientists, too.
So, what will eating a Batara accomplish, scientifically speaking? She saw me grinning at the prospect. Deep science. She smiled back at me.
We've tested the toxicity and run simulations to predict chemical breakdowns of digestion. But eventually, somebody just has to eat one under controlled circumstances.
Or not, I suggested. I've managed just fine on field rations in the base's commissary, and restaurants when I get back to Coronado. Oddly enough, they don't serve grilled Batara there.
ALM has a chemical division, Mr. Famra. We found some interesting molecules here on Nissim. How they react with the human body isn't known until it happens.
So you ran to the front of the line. That's a bold way to make a living.
Well,
She smiled.
I asked whether you'd ever tried one because it's pretty common among your colleagues, believe it or not.
Not me.
Our approach is a little safer than sampling. I can confirm the Batara isn't dangerous to eat. So if you'd like to try one with me, you're welcome to do so.
She could see by the way I shrugged that I was skeptical. And that was true of both the prospect of eating the creature and the possible scientific benefits of doing so. Molecules, she'd said, which seemed an odd way of phrasing it to me. But I guess as a biochemist, she was trained to think that way. I suppose I had ways of talking about water that probably sounded just as odd to her. Despite my skepticism of her project, she still treated me cordially. It was a rare treat to have good company out there. We chatted about our backgrounds while we flew. She was from out in the letters. She lived in 3 places, the most recent of which was a long stint at her credentialing university on Capa Navarra, an outpost I'd never heard of. She'd heard of Iophos, of course, but she'd never met an Iophan before, and she'd never been to the inner battery herself. We traded stories, pictures, and videos to pass the time. Then, we hit the water. Unsurprisingly, Dr. Cattell had never been underwater. She wasn't the first virgin submariner I'd had aboard before, but most are embarking on a career in the ocean. Now it was her turn to wear the skeptic's hat. I took her down very slowly at first, so she could see the surface gradually become more distant above us. Then, once I could tell she was comfortable, I began to take us down into the darkness. She was surprised by how vacant the ocean seemed. It was dark, of course, after 100 meters or so, and as we continued to descend and began to press forward, she remarked that there was nothing out here. There's a lot of water, I told her. Lots of space for the biologics to spread out.
Biologics?
She repeated, grinning.
Is that what you call them?
There are different categories our biologists curate, I told her.
We call them fish at ALM.
Really? They aren't fish, though. That's a terrestrial designation. Genetically, there's nothing quite like a fish in Nissim's waters. Though, structurally, there are creatures with the same body types.
What do you call them?
The fish-like creatures? She nodded. Goti, I told her. The biologists named them that. I'm not sure why, but apparently there's some joke there I don't get about the name.
In the Batara?
That's a different type of creature altogether, I replied. It's more like a cephalopod. I think they're called Heightens, but you should consult the field guide. Taxonomy isn't a strength of mine.
With all the time you spent out here?
I just shrugged. I guess it hasn't become an interest of mine yet. It took several hours submerged for us to come upon a Batara. Dr. Cattell was enraptured as soon as she saw her first marine life. It was a school of silver showra, tiny little disc-like creatures that undulate their wafer-thin bodies together through cold waters. She played the field guide's overview as we passed through a gigantic school of them slowly. I had to be careful not to clog the intake jets. And similarly, it always seemed callous to me to plow through the environment of these alien creatures, always keeping in mind that our ship and our very presence meant that we were really the alien creatures here. Respect for the native wildlife was a choice I adopted at every point it was reasonable. The Batara didn't eat showra, but their presence indicated a healthy, life-abundant region of these open waters. It wasn't long after we'd pushed through the showra school that we found several other larger species, and then, finally, a pod of Batara. I put out the gig drone and trapped one of the juveniles. I didn't do that work much. Hunting, I guess. I must admit, even though it was by remote and I kept my hands clean in the literal sense, I felt quite conflicted about it, to the point I said under my breath quite audibly, "For science," when I closed the aperture around it. Dr. Cattell didn't say anything, but I could see in her eyes that she understood the feeling, and in some sense, she seemed to share it with me. "You're meant to eat it now?" I asked her.
There's some work to do first,
She said.
Perhaps we should go up to the surface. Can we? I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed down here. Enclosed. I'd like to go out in the air if we can.
I shrugged and began to take us up. The hybrid submersible had a flat nose that could act as a foredeck from hatch to bow, with a pop-up frame for a nanosheet. It was a feature I rarely used in my work, as I never spent much time on the surface. I almost forgot it was an option. As we neared the surface, and the light began to return to the water outside the vessel, I asked Dr. Cattell if she had work to do on the Batara, tests and the like, and how it was to be prepared. As I suspected, like any fieldwork, there were plenty of measurements and samples to be taken of the Batara. I suggested we remain submerged until that work was complete. Dr. Cattell hadn't thought of the waves, which, out there in the greater Singing Sea, weren't so large, but I could keep the vessel steady as you like under the water. So we remained down for several hours while she was working, educating me as she went, an entirely new scientific field I'd never been exposed to before. She answered every question I had eagerly, save one. What effects do you expect the molecules you're tracing to have on the body? Dr. Cattell just smiled and said,
We'll find out soon enough.
When she'd finished preparations, I took us up. The hybrid had a fairly small draft when it was afloat, meaning the waterline only came about a third of the way up the vessel. Once the nanosheet was up and the atmosphere extended, we stepped out onto the forward run and sat on a set of seat cushions I had from the rear bench chest. Dr. Cattell asked me if we could swim. I did have rescue gear, flotation devices, suits, and respirators, but I suggested she not try, especially if she wasn't used to swimming in waves. This wasn't a place for beginners.
I was more curious than interested in trying myself,
She said.
Speaking of which,
As we sat, I looked over at her, wondering what she was trying to suggest.
I prepared more than one serving, Mr. Famra. You'll never have an opportunity to try it in a safer setting.
She put up a hand as though she'd misspoken.
Not that it isn't safe to eat anyway. It's totally safe.
Sounds like you're real sure of yourself, I joked.
I am.
She insisted.
I wouldn't be here doing it if I didn't think so.
Okay.
So?
She took out the small box where she'd set the prepared pieces of Batara. Then she picked up one of the small cubes of Batara flesh, popped it in her mouth, chewed, swallowed, and then looked out at the horizon as though contemplating. How is it? I asked her. She nodded and stated,
It's a little salty. Rich. Almost like a salty egg.
She then held out the box toward me.
It's good,
She said.
You should try.
I don't think I would have even considered it if the offer had come from one of my colleagues. There was something about her that made me feel comfortable. I felt okay, that we'd be doing it together. So I picked up the remaining morsel and I ate. I chewed and I swallowed, savoring the deep, complex, savory taste.
Good.
She said as I swallowed. It didn't seem like a question, but I answered anyway. Yeah, good. It was getting toward night by then. The sun was setting, a red disk through a gray, dull haze.
It's not Florestan,
She stated.
but it's pretty in its own way. Peaceful. The sound of the waves against the ship.
Have you ever been? I asked her.
Huh?
To Florestan. The way you said it made it seem like it was familiar. She shook her head.
I've only ever seen it in VR. I've never been out of the letters.
Maybe someday, I said.
You?
She asked me. Never. The waterlands are beautiful in their own way, but all the natural aspects of Dreesen's rings are either well curated or completely manufactured. Some even illusions, like the nanosheet that projects the sky. It's a convincing illusion, but this is the first place I've ever been with a real sunset. I pointed to the setting sun. That That is the light of a star approaching Nissim's horizon, and these waters encircle the entire planet. This place is real.
You can feel it.
She replied.
All the life. You can close your eyes and picture it. 1,000 meters of ocean beneath us filled with creatures yet to be discovered. I'm glad to be here with you, Mr. Famra.
You as well, Dr. Cattell. It's a revelation of a kind. To be here almost 2 years thinking I had a sense of the place. Yet today it feels totally new.
I like it here,
she replied, watching as the horizon began to slowly clip its jagged edges into the perfect red disk. I asked her that night, before we turned into sleep, whether she preferred to float on the surface or dive beneath.
What's the difference?
If you don't get seasick, the rocking motion of the waves can be soothing. If you do get seasick, I promise you'll regret that bite of Batara.
Let's go down then,
she said.
I don't want to take any chances.
I secured the top hatch and took the hybrid down several meters, just enough that we couldn't feel the pull of any waves.
Would you do me a favor, Mr. Famra?
She asked me.
For the science?
I shrugged.
We don't have a baseline for you, but we can compare against each other.
She pulled up a sleek-fitting type of stocking over her head to demonstrate.
Brainwaves,
Dr. Cattell stated.
I'd like to track your dreams.
For the science, of course.
For the science.
Again, there was something about her that compelled me to say yes. I guess I didn't want to disappoint her. She sat across from me and placed the cap on my head very gently. I couldn't help but notice the softness of her hands.
Pleasant dreams,
she said to me, smiling again before she turned toward her bunk, and we wished each other a good night. Dreams were never a curiosity of mine. As I was drifting off that night, though, I did find it curious that she was interested in tracking our dreams. I was anxious to ask her the following morning about the connection between the Batara and our dreams. I didn't even give a thought to what might be in store for me that night before I woke up again to meet Dr. Cattell the following day. It occurred to me that I hadn't noticed her properly. There was a glow about her skin, and the way she smiled around me was so familiar. It was like she lit up in my presence, and there was a warmth in my own heart when I saw her. She took my hand at one point. We walked along the wooded pathway between Wine Garden and Harab. She'd never seen the Waterlands before, and she was enjoying every moment of it. I was proud to show it to her, this place I'd always cherished. We sat on the sand for some time, our eyes meeting as we talked. I could feel the coolness of the sand on my legs. We only had one moment of conflict. She insisted that she would lead the way, that we should try one of the fish for dinner. First, I tried explaining that there weren't any fish in the Waterlands. Then, when she wouldn't hear it, I explained that it was a park, a public interest everyone on the ring had a shared stake in. There couldn't possibly be enough fish for everyone who visited these waters to share. Reluctantly, she agreed. And though I could tell she was angry, she accepted it, because it came from me, and she knew that I didn't disagree with her to hurt her. We were both trying to find the truth in the moment, and I told her that I couldn't believe I didn't see her before. She was wearing the most beautiful orange dress over her swimsuit that fell so delicately over her shoulders. How could I have missed her? Right there in front of me, vivid as anything. Suong. I'd never dreamed like that before. It was so intense that I almost felt like the universe had shifted that night, that I'd gone to sleep in one life on one track and woken up in an entirely new reality. I didn't want to say it, because I knew it had all been a dream, but I hadn't forgotten, and suddenly she was there with me in my hybrid, and I couldn't unsee her. Nor could I suppress the feeling that there was an energy between us that hadn't been there the day before. My eyes must have given me away when I looked at her again the following morning. She smiled at me the way she had in my dream. "Can you help me with this?" I asked her, gesturing toward the cap on the top of my head. She nodded. As she worked to unfasten the straps, she was reluctant to look at me, almost as though she was holding her breath. Her hands were so soft against my cheek, under my chin, and when she finally looked at me, her eyes were so familiar that I couldn't help but hold my gaze there on her. The moment lasted so long she turned away blushing.
How did you sleep, Inolo?
She asked me, gasping and then shaking her head.
I'm sorry, Mr. Famra. That was too familiar.
I had Very interesting dreams, I told her. Memorable, pleasant dreams. She smiled.
Is that unusual for you?
Very much so. And it's fine. I mean, you can call me Anolo if you like. We have a few more days together, no? Perhaps we shouldn't be so formal. If you're comfortable on more casual terms, that is. She smiled back at me. I think she could sense that I was nervous, being careful to choose my words exactly.
Call me Rena.
I asked her if she would like to have coffee up on the surface before we got started for the day. She smiled.
I'd love that.
I took a chance that morning and told her about my dreams. She didn't reciprocate, but I could tell by the way she listened that she wasn't offended, maybe even flattered. She told me that vivid dreams were the primary focus of her study. People had no shortage of protein sources, and hadn't struggled in that respect for millennia. We'd figured out how to feed ourselves in space, but the flesh of several of the creatures in these waters had been rumored to feed something else, something far deeper than the stomach, or even the body. The next of Nissim's creatures she had come here to test was called a suang. When she asked me where we could find one, I wasn't immediately sure. I'd seen them in deep, deep waters over the course of my nearly 2 years of surveying. The field guide had an equally vague sense of where they could reliably be found. After breakfast on the foredeck, as we were sitting, finishing the last of our coffee, Rena turned her body and reached her hand out to me. It was surreal. With the exception of the clothes we were wearing, it was a reenactment of that moment from my dream. The exact way she tilted her head, the shape of her eyes, the color of the light on her cheeks, her posture. All of it was a vision of the moment from my dream when she'd asked to lead me. I gave her my hand.
I didn't share everything that I know,
she said.
Truthfully, that's because I wasn't sure whether I believed it myself. There were stories that went beyond vivid dreams. People came to believe unbelievable things.
What types of things, Rena?
A lot of different anecdotes. Most of them orbited a larger narrative that these beings are all connected somehow. I'm not sure I can believe it, but I wouldn't have believed what happened last night either. I just thought we might experience a weird dream or two, in the normal sense. I had no idea, really.
I'm not sure what you're trying to say.
Close your eyes and hold hands with me, Anolo. Concentrate. I think maybe.
If we focus? I was too much a skeptic to even finish the question properly, but we both knew what I meant. Could we find this creature? Or, more rightly, could it bring us to them? We sat together, and in truth, I was content to play along for as long as I got to hold Rena's hands. Until she was there with me, I'd had no sense of just how lonely it was out on those seas by myself, month upon month. We let the waves dance us along in the current for what seemed like minutes, our hands settled in the other's gentle grip, the sound of the water washing along the side of the ship, whispering like its own kind of subtle music. We didn't speak, and suddenly our eyes were both open, gazing off toward the same point on the horizon, a gentle pull, a heading. Should we try? I asked her.
You're too skeptical, Anolo,
she replied.
I can tell you don't believe it for a moment.
There's one way to convince me, and it's at that heading.
Then what are we waiting for?
We went inside together, eager as the hybrid hovered and then hissed forward into the morning mists that hung above the water. It felt funny to me to set a course without a genuine destination. It was almost like we were pinging a random point in the stars and wondering if anyone would answer our call. And who would they be? What would they say to us? She looked out at the horizon, at the waves. Her face was a picture of peace. I'm not sure I'd ever seen a look quite like it on another person in my entire life, as though she was exactly where she was supposed to be in the moment. She noticed me looking over at her, and each time she did, she smiled back at me. As the flight continued, we began to talk. She shared details with me about her research.
I'd heard stories, Anolo, but I was skeptical like you. I didn't think they could be true.
What stories? I asked her.
There are people in Coronado. Some people call them a cult. Most of them have no reason to believe the stories, but they do. There are a few, supposedly, who have eaten some of the creatures from the seas of Nissim. They had dreams, too.
Dreams like ours? She smiled and shrugged.
Dreams of their own, I guess. They believe there's something here. A presence.
Life, you mean?
More like a life force. A spirit, I've heard some describe it as.
Did you come here looking for this spirit, Rena? She shook her head.
No. I came for the reasons I said. I work for ALM. I came here to find molecules and to test them, to see how they affect cognition.
I suddenly had a strange sensation, a pull in my gut. Rena looked over at my face. She frowned. Do you? I didn't finish my question. She nodded. She began tilting her body away from our course, even lifting a hand to our port side. You feel that? I asked. She nodded. I changed course, slowly, bringing the hybrid along a new vector. I kept turning us to port. Rena closed her eyes. I was tempted to do the same.
Keep us in the sky,
she said. I don't know how she knew it, but she seemed to know my instinct. I felt like I could zero in on our new vector if I shut my eyes as well. She didn't like the idea of a blind pilot. I couldn't quite feel it, though. She was breathing deeply, feeling it for me.
Keep going,
she stated.
A little farther.
I kept the hybrid banking, ever so gently to port. A few seconds later, she nodded.
Okay, Enolo. Straight ahead now.
Rena opened her eyes. I steadied the ship and we continued on that vector. It was a strange feeling. As soon as the ship was set on what felt like the correct course, everything in my body relaxed, and Rena did too. We began to talk more freely. We spoke about our lives, our childhoods. We talked about our differences, a life on Iophos versus the letters, the foods we ate, the music we listened to, the games we played, the stories we loved. I'm not sure I smiled as much in the entire 2 years I was on Nissim as I did in that hour or so we were cruising toward the Suang. When it came time to dive, we didn't need to say a word. I simply slowed the ship to a hover, brought us down, and then dove. We went deep. The ship got colder and quiet. For a while the sea seemed empty, dark and black, and then it was just there. A lone Suang that swam right up to the front glass as though it was sent to us expressly for our benefit. Rena looked out at it and nodded. It seemed as though she was grateful to the dutiful creature as we turned toward the rear controls to put out the drone. Rena seemed reverent as she prepared her samples of the creature. She put on music that was calming, so that as she worked, her focus was entirely there in that moment, toward each purposeful action. Then, as before, she cut 2 small cubes of the Suang's flesh and placed them inside the same small box, signaling to me that it was time to rise to the surface. By that time, after hours of traveling and watching her work, I was ready to sit with her out on the foredeck. I couldn't wait to sample the creature. So quickly, it occurred to me. So quickly had I gone from skeptic to reluctant consumer of Nissim's natural treasures. And now, I was eager to experience the opening of new doors in my own mind, and to do it together with Rena. I'm not sure I could have said no even if I'd wanted to. We sat on the foredeck, an afternoon sun this time. It was more overcast here, closer to the equator. The clouds filtered the sunlight, casting an orange glow over the gentle waves. This time we each ate together. Then we lay back, side by side with the 2 cushions pressed together, looking up at the sky. We held hands. After a while, she rested her head under my shoulder. We didn't say anything, just breathed, listening to the water lapping against the ship. I'm not sure if I fell asleep, but the time seemed to slip right past us. Before we knew it, the sun was setting again. We sat up and watched together, and then we ate dinner. Not long after that, she fitted me with my headgear for the night, and she set her own. Then we each retreated to our separate bunk for the night. That moment, I can say, was a strange one. Here we were, enclosed in the small space of my hybrid. A few steps could have closed the distance between us, but in that moment, it felt like she was 1,000,000 miles away from me. It felt wrong, like earlier in the day when we were traveling in the wrong direction. I got restless, and the feeling didn't go away until something entirely different was happening. I must have forgotten. We were elsewhere, but Rena was there, I knew. I could feel her there somewhere. I began to walk toward her. That place felt like a memory of a distant time and civilization, the society where people used to be a fixture of the landscape, rather than just visitors on it. We weren't alien there. It was a city, a cool night, a village of wood and stone. I walked past many people on my way forward. Homes, shops, schools, churches. Then she was there in front of me. "I found you," I told Rena. "You look beautiful in that dress."
I thought I found you.
She replied, then looking down at the long red gown.
What am I wearing? I've never seen such a thing.
It was only then I noticed I was wearing an old-style suit, like the people here. It felt more like a costume than attire. Around us, suddenly, the people were bustling, and as we noticed them, their pace grew more frenetic. They were running now. An orange glow began to penetrate the black surrounding the city. Rena began to rush forward, pulling on my hand. We climbed up a set of stone stairs, then a metal ladder that was fixed into the side of that grand stone building's wall. And, from up on that flat balcony, we could see the entire city was now engulfed in flames. It had happened so fast.
The wood,
She said.
It must be the wood.
I shook my head. Or something else.
We need to get out of here.
She insisted. Her body was shaking. "What if we don't?" I asked her. "What if we stay right here together?" She looked at me, and I at her. Suddenly she grew calm. I touched her cheek. Nothing felt real except for her. When we embraced, I felt the warmth of her skin and the moisture of her breath on that cold night. When we kissed, it felt so real. Every moment of her hand along my arm, across my back, her lips, her eyelashes tickling my cheek. Was it hours or days? The fire was gone. There was no smoke. We were lying there together on that slate balcony looking up at the stars.
Why does it feel so right when I'm with you, Enolo?
She asked me.
How can it be? I barely know you. Or maybe I've known you forever, and I'm just remembering it now. I'm not sure.
I don't want to wake up, I told her.
Are we dreaming this?
She asked. Then the whole world shook. I exhaled as it fell away. I was in my bunk, alone, and she was just there across the hybrid now. I could feel her there, away from me. Hatakshi. When I got up, Rena was already standing in the small cutout she'd been using as the makeshift lab in the back of the hybrid. She was looking at a map of the currents in the central Singing Sea, but as she sensed my presence, she looked over at me. She hesitated. I thought for a moment, too. What was real? Could she have felt what I felt that night? It was just a foolish moment, a weak human fear. I chose to ignore it as I stepped toward her.
It's you,
She stated as I embraced her, kissing her forehead. In that first step, it gave her permission to ignore the same fear she was feeling in that moment, the possibility that we hadn't shared what the other thought we'd shared. She kissed me back. It somehow felt even better, even more right.
I knew it was you.
She said after the initial embrace.
I didn't want it to end.
Me either, I replied. I'm not sure it has to. Does it have to, Rena? We don't have to think about it today, do we? We have a week. It was only our third day together, but she looked doubtful, almost sad. What's next? I asked her. The Batara and the Suong. Now what?
That was it, Enolo. I have all the samples I need. ALM thought it would take much longer than it did to find them. Or maybe they allotted more time than I needed just to be sure.
I don't feel like that's it, Rena. I feel like there must be more.
I don't know.
We don't have to go back now. We don't. My bosses don't expect us back for days.
What would we do out here?
What should we do out here, Rena?
Maybe we should go up to the surface, have coffee, sit with it for a while.
I think that sounds like a great idea, I told her. I'll make the coffee. Rena went up to the front and sat. She looked out the front glass into the darkness as I fixed coffee and breakfast. It felt like our worlds were shaking. The impossible certainty had given way to the reality of reality. Schedules imposed on our thoughts, plans, objectives, manifestations of life that didn't impose on us in that other world. But that feeling we had, that magnetic pull, I told myself that was as real as any of the intrusions. It had to be. I couldn't deny it, and I wouldn't let Rena try to tell me otherwise. By the time the coffee was ready, she'd come to the same conclusion.
We can't go back to the way things were,
she declared.
I wasn't searching, Anulo, but I can't turn away now that I've found you. We can't.
I agree. So let's not. Let's be the masters of our own destiny. We can start with breakfast. She looked at me and smiled.
Up we go then.
We weren't long on the surface before I felt everything shift. All the tethers to our professional lives seemed now, as they always were, secondary concerns. The duties that we performed to enable our real lives. The waters were choppy, so we had to sip our coffee with both hands. But we sat together, her shoulder against my chest, steadying each other as the ship bounced. When we were finished with breakfast, I took the cups inside the hybrid's hatch, piling our food wrappings inside the rim of mine. We almost didn't need to talk anymore. She knew to stay sitting on the foredeck, because she knew I was coming back to sit with her, and we knew what we were going to do. Our sensing of the Suong, which had told us where to find it, something new would call to us today, would tell us where to go. I sat and put out my hands. Rena took them in hers. We closed our eyes, and as the waves shook us, we locked our legs together. We were steady, quiet, calm in choppy waters. The answer presented itself again. A pull, a heading, a sense of a name. She said it aloud.
Hatakshi.
Is that what it's called? I asked her. We opened our eyes.
That's what it's called,
she assured me. Let's go find it, I declared. We went back down. It looked like it wouldn't be easy. Inline systems showed that a cyclone was forming over our heading, and there was nothing in the planet's taxonomical record matching any sort of spelling we could conjure for the Hatakshi.
It's possible no one's ever seen one before,
she said.
And if we haven't seen it yet, we certainly haven't ever written down its name before.
What do you think it calls us? I joked.
I'm not sure yet,
she answered earnestly.
I suppose it will depend on what we do next.
I set a course and took us up, heading straight for the low-pressure system forming over the Singing Sea. At first, the quiet peace we carried down with us into the hybrid settled between us as we jetted into the strengthening storm. There seemed no reason not to be calm. It was much like in the dream world. As the fires rose around us, we trained our focus on each other and on the path in front of us. This course I set, was certainly against every policy I'd been trained on. It was a calculation I'd never have taken before Rena. We had to get to the other side of this storm, and it would take days to do so submerged. She didn't have to ask me about the urgency. Once we decided to press forward, we both understood that this next step was only a step. We needed the time. What if this Hatakshi had further plans for us? We had to be able to take the next step after that. I'm a good pilot, I assured Rena as the hybrid began to bounce unsettlingly. As I uttered those words, I couldn't help but think of my reputation. Steady. This was exactly what a steady pilot wouldn't do, and more. As we pressed farther into the rapidly strengthening storm, I came to the realization that I had done the last thing a good pilot should ever do: limit his options to poor ones. For it was no longer just the skies that were choppy and dangerous. The waves now rose up in wild, raging whitecaps, cresting in giant, roving hills of tremendous frenetic energy. I didn't tell Rena, because I didn't want to frighten her, but it was no longer simply a matter of setting the hybrid down and gently diving to an escape below the tumult. For if in the process of submerging, the waves tipped us belly up, we would surely stall out and sink before I would ever have a chance at righting us. And we would end at crush depth, a watery grave thousands of meters below the surface. Even the cresting waves slapping at the intakes would cause problems until I could spit them out as we dove, should we be lucky enough to get beneath the surface with our heads still right side up. I looked at her now as the hybrid lurched. Her eyes were closed, her fists clenched, her lips pursed on the cusp of speaking. I could only imagine in silent prayer. It went like this for several hours, the hybrid cutting a course diagonally through the storm clouds as the enormous cyclone materialized and intensified, forming an ever more pronounced and clearly defined eye. It was not my intention to challenge the storm directly. At the first opportunity to turn with the winds, I guided the hybrid into the storm's churn, a tailwind now that came slightly across us. The winds and the rain were so bad that we hadn't had a good reading on the surface for several hours, but I could only imagine the state of the sea. To her credit, for as terrifying as the flight must have been, Rena didn't cry out. She gripped her seat. She clutched the straps holding her down, and she did her best to ignore the steady stream of flight alerts warning me just how far beyond flight tolerances I was taking my trusty hybrid. But she was rattling. As we lurched in the wind, I heard metallic screeching from the tail, such as I'd never experienced in my months operating her. And that thought, months, that was when I began to truly doubt. For me to say I was a good pilot? What a foolish thing to say after mere months of experience. In calm seas, in clear skies. Surely I was a good pilot then. But now? I had to set us down, I thought. It was too far to push through to the other side of the storm. I had no other goal beyond survival now. No Hatakshi, no Suong, no Batara. Just me and Rena, making it through the terror, still breathing. For even if we made it through the storm floating, I thought, what if the engine goes? Or just the atmospherics or the electrical? We would be left to suffocate in Nissim's own atmosphere.
We're going to be all right, Enolo.
Rena stated in a firm, loud tone that carried over all the background noise.
You're doing a good job.
I don't think I had betrayed the fear that had been building in my heart. Hold tight, I told her. It may be a little rough as we punch through the eye wall. It was a heavy understatement. The screeching from the rear of the ship overtook all the other noises. Even the warning systems blaring in my earpiece eventually gave up their pleading after several hours. This singing sea was howling to a pitch that seemed utterly unsurvivable, until suddenly the ship lurched forward as though it was lifted and pulled by some calm, invisible hand. In a flash of a moment, the sky was clear and bright above the giant, churning, cylindrical white wall. I'm going to get us down, I announced to Rena, which looked possible as I said it. From 1,000 meters up, the waters looked calm enough down there. But as we approached the surface, I began to wonder if I hadn't made a terrible mistake as I struggled to sight a patch of water steady enough to set us down. Even in the midst of the storm's eye, the waves were spectacularly fierce.
I have faith in you, Enolo,
Rena said, and I wondered who this person could be to think that. How could she? Why would she? I wondered about it only long enough to realize that I should justify that faith, that it was my duty to do no less. I needed to land the hybrid in a valley between two monstrous, moving hills. Pick a good one, Enolo, I said to myself. I took a deep breath as we descended, and then, in the final meters before meeting the water's surface, I felt my own lips almost silently praying. I kissed the water with the hybrid's belly, turning into a downdraft quickly to steady our nose. I flipped switches, transferring systems without even thinking. Valves closed. Screws turned. Jets hissed to a halt. Water bubbled up over the front glass. We lurched. We rocked. I turned us with it, down into the rising wave. Steady on. Down. Down. And within a few tense seconds, the two of us silently listening for some evidence of our undoing, we looked about the craft for water creeping down the walls. All that met us was a still calm. I continued to dive us gently down, 100 meters, 200. No screeching, no cracking or hissing. We were down. I'm sorry if I frightened you, Rena, I told her. I would never want to do anything to hurt you.
What we do together, Enolo,
she replied.
I told you I have faith in you.
We sat for a while, catching our breath, processing.
I think we're closer than before,
Rena finally declared. And it took me a moment to realize that she wasn't talking about us. She was talking about the creature, The Hatakshi. Right, I replied. We might as well get on with it. The storm moved faster and faster above us as the hybrid churned under it. Even so, it took the entire rest of the day before we found ourselves passing under the outer bands of the cyclone's backside. We'd eaten, we'd each shared some of our favorite music as we chugged along, and we'd laughed about our foolishness, the way we'd followed our blind feelings into the worst kind of peril. And there, along the outskirts of the storm, swimming it seemed in vast circular lines with the cycling of the storm, we could see these dark, ribbon-like creatures following the flow of water around the great axis of energy. We didn't have to name them then. We both knew.
I think
Rena said as we pulled in one of the Hatakshi.
we should stay below the surface this time.
I nodded my approval and queued up some music I thought Rena would like. It was peaceful now, the two of us standing together as she prepared the samples. It was almost a ritual for us now. We could feel it, too, the sacredness of it. We gave thanks to the creature for its sacrifice. It was only as we sat together on the floor of the submersible that it occurred to me to ask Rena, "You haven't tested it?" She shook her head.
No one has.
"We don't know what this is," I stated, as she held the little box there in her palms.
Yes, we do, Anolo.
She said.
We just have to have the courage to believe it.
I picked up one of the cubes, and before popping it into my mouth, I declared, "I have faith in you, Rena." After I swallowed, I took the box in one hand and held it up for Rena as I took her hand in mine. She reached up with her free hand and placed the cube of flesh in her mouth. Then we sat with our eyes closed, facing one another, our hands in each other's. We drifted as we relaxed. What a day it had been. I suddenly felt exhausted.
If I don't get up now, I may not be able to,
she declared. Come then, let's go to sleep. That feeling I'd had the night before, as she'd walked away from me to the other side of the ship, I didn't want to feel that feeling ever again. So as we got up together, I held Rena tight to my side, and I didn't let her go, nor did she even think to step away. Instead, she followed me this night to my bunk, and we lay down together and drifted off to sleep in each other's arms. I couldn't say how much of it was the dream and how much of it was reality, for it felt like we slept very little. But we alternated between lying together in darkness and gazing up at a sky I could only describe as an airy aurora of mesmerizing colors. The two of us remained obscured in a high grass field. I'm not certain if there were other people out beyond the grass. Neither of us were particularly inclined to find out. The light above us seemed to beckon to us, or at least kept our rapt attention focused on the sky. That light, we knew, was out there somewhere in our universe, but I'm not sure we knew how to get back there. I can't say I'd ever known a warmth like I experienced returning from sleep the following morning. I'm not sure I'd ever woken up in the right place before. Not like that.
I saw lights.
Rena said as she was waking.
Such lights. I wanted to stay there forever while I was under that sky.
And now?
Now I want to stay here with you, Enolo.
That would make me happy, I told her. For a little while. But soon, I'm going to want some coffee and breakfast. Would you stay with me?
For breakfast?
Yeah, for breakfast. She nodded and smiled, opening her eyes now for the first time in earnest.
I'd like that,
Rena said. We didn't talk much as we ate and sipped our coffee. There was too much happening. Funny to say, because had there been anyone there besides us to bear witness to those moments, they'd have sworn nothing was happening. Just breakfast. Two quiet people sharing breakfast together under the waves. The most important moments of my life unfolding, utterly unobservable. I was coming to some realizations. The price for lying with her under those lights. Suddenly, Rena had appeared. Suddenly, I was no longer complete without her. That reality was, for me, as breathtaking as those dreamlike lights had been. Unspeakably good. So good that words failed, maybe even thoughts. But it put a truth to a reality that I found nearly as destabilizing as it was beautiful. I think if I didn't have Rena there, experiencing the same, I might have come unmoored, because it demonstrated to me, in striking relief, just how empty my entire existence had been before her.
totally oblivious to the fact I was leading a mostly empty life. A steady man who had a job, a steady income, something to do tomorrow that kept me from feeling aimless, mapping the currents of the seas on a secret ocean world. And it occurred to me that this purpose wasn't even what I'd really wanted to do in the first place. I'd really wanted to keep the water flowing through an entirely artificial ecosystem, on an entirely artificial world, blind to the reality that I wasn't any of those things. I started thinking about meaning, purpose, who I really was. I didn't even have to ask Rena what she was thinking about in that moment. It looked only like she was having coffee with me. Gven. We didn't need to talk about it. We weren't going back. Not until we got where we were going. Meaning and purpose, those were ahead of us. Only not exactly ahead of us. The pull now was undeniable and relentless. In the hours we'd been sleeping, with the hybrid steadily making its way beneath the waves, and above them, the storm rushing onward, we'd made our way to a patch of waters at the southern current, where the sea most lived up to her musical name. The sea sung here if it did anywhere. My colleagues, who'd experienced otherworldly encounters, spoke mostly of this place, and perhaps, I was learning, that was not arbitrary at all. The pull was downward. We would not find answers at the surface. We were being called downward, toward meaning, toward purpose. What that purpose was, in that moment, I could not say. But we got up and put away our cups, and we took each other's hand, and we walked together toward the front of the ship to answer that call. I didn't need to say anything, not after the storm. Rena trusted me, but I told her everything I was considering to reassure her. The hybrid could go down to nearly 2,000 meters safely. However, I was not going to test her limit after the experience we'd had flying through the storm. Our floor would be 1,800, which approached the summits of the ocean peaks that made the waters above that submerged mountain range so tumultuous. It would take us nearly 2 hours to dive safely. She understood I was being cautious. We had time. Our entire lives awaited us after this. I had the sense that this was just the beginning, whatever it was. She reached over to me. I took Rena's hand as we descended, and finally let go when both our arms grew tired of reaching so far for each other. At that depth, it was as pitch black as the darkest reaches of space. Most of the creatures I'd encountered at such depths in my surveying work were eyeless, though some possessed various tricks of biology to produce light. And then there were times when you swore you saw light where there was none. Figments. The light we saw as we reached 1,800 meters was so subtle at first that we had to shut off everything in the ship to be sure we were seeing it. In truth, though, neither of us doubted what it was. The light hovered over us in a familiar, comforting way, a confirmation more than anything. We were exactly where we were supposed to be. Rena got up from her seat and tried to sit beside me.
I want to be close to you,
she said. When it proved impossible for us to sit in that captain's chair side by side, she sat down on my lap. She put her head on my shoulder as we waited. Though the light was above us, Gven came from below. Her energy seemed ethereal. I had never seen anything like her. Not in the galaxy. Not even in dreams. Whether she was material at all, I'm not even sure I could say. Even the things I can say, I'm not even sure can be said. She didn't communicate in words. I'm not even sure I thought the thoughts that possessed my understanding of what we were then and what we needed to become. She thought we were the strangest creatures she had ever beheld. She thought it was funny that until that moment, we hadn't even known what we were. She also thought it was a strange kind of peril that the fates of the creatures of this world now fell into such unreliable hands as ours. Gven knew so much she couldn't have known. The war that had never come to Nissim was ending. That meant the peoples who hadn't come in significant numbers could now come at will. She knew that they would, if nothing were done. She knew that because she knew how powerful dreams were to all the other creatures out there like us, who, she also knew, were more numerous than the stars. As soon as we knew this, we knew our purpose. The Batara, the Suong, the Hatakshi, Gven, The cult in Coronado. The 10 trillion people in the battery. How few among them knew what they were. I couldn't merely absorb these thoughts. I couldn't keep the human thoughts from seeping into my head. Rena must have been thinking human thoughts too. It wasn't contemptuous at all, the last part, when she spoke to us in words. Or at least we heard the words. She couldn't have spoken at all, this telepathic messenger.
My silly beloved brethren, don't look so shocked to find me here. There is nothing more elusive in existence than the boundaries of his kingdom. Now, at least, you know that much to be true.
Then, she vanished. Darkness returned so impossibly fast it did seem dreamlike. And just as fast, in that sudden absence of her light, the thoughts poured in, the tainted certainty of reason. A lifetime of training in skepticism and doubt. I wondered 1,000 years' worth of science in a matter of moments. I rationalized. I hedged. A collective biological consciousness? A planetary immune system? A parasitic trans-species genetic chiron, emblazoning self-preservation inside each cell of the biome? Psychoactive biological diplomacy? The subtler weapons of an otherwise defenseless, life-bearing ocean? What better way to protect an ecosystem than to recruit the enemy to defend her? Rena wrapped her arm around my neck and pulled herself as close to me as she could get.
I don't think we should wait any longer, Enolo. We have so much work to do.
In the face of all that ingrained self-doubt, certainty, the smell of her hair against my neck, how stunningly fast the universe changes. 2 days prior, I'd thought the universe was a place. No, I agreed. We've been waiting far too long. We fell into each other there, in that moment, and there wasn't a force in all creation to ever pull us apart again. Not even doubt. Our names. The oceans of Nissim. The angel, Gven. All of it was ephemeral. All of it was eternal. My silly, beloved brethren. The angel, Gven. This has been an original story, written and read by P.E. Rowe. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this story. If you're enjoying the channel and you enjoyed today's story, I'd humbly ask that you leave a like on today's video, as it helps the channel to grow and reach more sci-fi fans like you. It's been a busy few weeks behind the scenes, even though it's been quieter on the channel than I intended. That is going to change soon, but there are still a few hurdles to clear in the coming weeks with the upcoming books, so I'm not quite ready to declare a return to regular weeklies yet. It is my intention to put out a new story for next Thursday though. That story will be a Misfits origins story for Dr. Wren. I'll do my best to get the story ready by next Thursday if it's possible. I'll also do my best to keep posting updates to the post tab on the P.E. Rowe YouTube channel, so please check in there if you'd like to stay up to date on new stories on the channel and what's going on with the upcoming book release. More stories and books and other big plans are in the works in the coming weeks, and I can't wait to share it all with you soon. Until then, thank you for listening. This has been P.E. Rowe, and we'll see you next time.